Hello, and welcome to the Assessment Alchemist, the podcast where we transform the daunting world of assessments into a journey of empowerment and achievement for educators and students alike. I'm Tina Wiles, your guide in this quest to conquer test anxiety and unlock the secrets of effective test preparation. In each episode, we'll mix the perfect blend of expert insights, practical strategies, and inspiring stories, all designed to help you turn test taking into a positive, enriching experience for your students. Whether you're a teacher, a school counselor, or an educational enthusiast, you're in the right place to create alchemy in learning and assessment. So let's dive into today's topic and discover how we can turn educational challenges into opportunities for growth and success. Welcome to the Assessment Alchemist. As I said, I am Tina Wiles, and welcome to episode 1 of the Assessment Alchemist. I am so glad that you are here. And today is actually going to be an introduction to the journey of educational alchemy. And I'm going to go through some questions about things such as why alchemist? What's assessment alchemy? And a little bit about my journey through my educational journey and how I got to where I am and why I created this podcast. So welcome. So let's just dive right in. So what is an educational alchemist? So an alchemist is someone who transforms things for the better. Okay. And alchemy, so the actual definition, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it says alchemy was the medieval forerunner of chemistry based on the supposed transformation of matter. It was concerned particularly with attempts to convert base metals into gold or to find a universal elixir. Okay, so it would be alchemy and astrology have similar backgrounds. But the definition that why I decided to use Assessment Alchemist as the name of the podcast is that alchemy is also a seemingly magical process of transformation, creation, or combination. And I think that assessment needs to go through a magical process of transformation to be utilized more for what it should be, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of things in assessment are actually assessing a test taker's anxiety versus the test taker's knowledge, especially when it comes to standardized testing. So let me explain that a little bit. Over 60% of students suffer from test anxiety to the point that it actually is detrimental to the grade on their exam. Okay, they get a worse grade simply because of the anxiety and how they feel about taking the test instead of what is on the test. So an educational alchemist is someone that wants to join this journey of working and researching and figuring out and listening, contributing to the discussion around how we can transform the educational landscape for the better. Okay. Why I'm focused on assessment? Obviously, assessments are important in education, and I know a lot of teachers are not a fan of especially standardized assessments such as ACT, SAT, and all the other state tests thrown in, simply because we don't want to teach to the test, right? And you want to make sure that but you're also like sometimes reviews are based on how your students are doing on assessments, right? So it's this love-hate relationship I feel towards assessments. But I've been living in the world of assessments for over 17 years. So a little bit about my background. My degree is actually industrial and operations engineering from the University of Michigan. And I did work as an industrial and manufacturing engineer at Motorola way back in the late 90s, in the prime cell phone. Everyone's starting to get cell phones age. So, like the original flip phones, I worked on manufacturing those. Um, basically, the phones are so old, they're in museums now. And then when I started having a family, I had a crazy 2 hour commute each way. And I worked for about a year after my oldest was born. And then I was just like, and I'm done. And so I was trying to find what my next step would be. And I'd always thought about teaching someday, and the opportunity to help a friend's son in college level math fell into my lap. And I was like, oh my gosh, tutoring is my calling. I'm meant to teach. And so I did that. Along the way, I found out that ACT and SAT were much more important. The scores on the test were much more important than they were when I graduated from high school. Still took the test. The score was important, but it wasn't like we spent months preparing, right? It was more like you might review one or two things and then make sure you go to bed early on Friday night because your test was on Saturday. Where I didn't realize the multi-billion-dollar industry that test preparation had become. And I found I have a knack for simplifying what can be intimidating about tests, to make them a lot easier, right? And honestly, my whole goal is I just want students to walk into tests more confident, because with the thousands of students I've worked with, I've realized that the more confident that the student is, the better they're going to do when they take an exam. And so I built this framework that is about reviewing content as important, right? But also test taking skills and learning the mindset needed in order to do well. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about on the Assessment Alchemist, and specific things that you could do. We're going to interview experts in different areas and people that are doing research on test anxiety, and talking about bias that is inherent in some assessments, right? All different kinds of conversations with researchers and psychologists and administrators at schools. And I'm just really excited about the possibilities. All right. We're going to talk about how educators can be alchemists in their classrooms. So like I said, we're going to talk about specific innovative things that teachers can do. So if you're an administrator, you could share with teachers, or if you're a teacher or a parent or educational enthusiast listening to this podcast, that you could share with the teachers in your lives to help transform the approach to teaching and assessments. And when I talk about the teaching, I don't necessarily mean like the day-to-day how someone's teaching in the classroom, but basically like the language around assessments and preparing for assessments, and what it looks like before, and then like immediately before the exam, and then during the exam, and then after, right? And there are things that you could do in all stages to actually help students and minimize the anxiety. I want to have a discussion around what role does student well-being play in assessment? Because it has been shown that since COVID, the anxiety rates have almost doubled in our K-12 students. And there's a definite link between student health, mental health, test anxiety, and performance on the exam. So this is things like people changing their answers, and where does test anxiety come from, and what are the causes of test anxiety. Test taking is a skill, and since it's a skill, it means that we can improve it, right? And I think a lot of students, can't tell you, I hear on almost the daily that I just don't do well on tests. No, right now you don't think that you can, but you can learn how to do well on tests, right? Like there are things that you can learn and teach. I want to talk about what innovative assessment methods are emerging. So new, like I said, we'll talk to researchers, but effective assessment methods, and then how things are changing. So obviously, there's a big swing right now towards going to digital based assessments versus pencil and paper. Perfect example is the College Board is in the process of making this swing. So in October of 2023 was the first national, U.S. national PSAT slash NMSQT. So the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test was provided only digitally across the country. And as a precursor to in 2024, so March of 2024 is the first SAT of the year, and that is all digital. So you can no longer take the SAT pencil and paper unless it's for accommodation reasons. So it's all, and it's a completely different test and the same content. But when I talk about like strategies and mindset and tools that you can use, right? A lot of things have changed in the exam. So there are definite differences for how to prepare for different types of tests. And then the last thing that we want to, well, not last thing, but last thing I want to talk about today that we want to touch on are how can parents and the wider community contribute to this discussion around assessment alchemy, changing the like a holistic and effective approach to assessments. I have 4 children, 4 sons, ages 14, 17, 19, and 21. So I have 2 in college. I have one that is a junior in high school, and I have an 8th grader. And my 8th grader actually has anxiety to the point that he has an IEP for it. And so I understand this from the educator viewpoint as well as from the parent viewpoint. And there are things that parents can do to help our kids with those situations. And a lot of times, I don't think parents realize that anxiety or like frustration they've experienced in their own lives regarding assessment that they could pass on to their kids without even realizing it. So, talking about healthy dialogue around assessments is something that parents can do. I did forget to say, I was too excited to talk about other assessment stuff. A little bit more about my background. So after I went into ACT and SAT prep, I went back to school and got certified to be a high school math teacher. And about 10 years ago, I worked in inner city Chicago in a charter school network called Noble. I worked for Noble for about a year and a half. And I loved the environment. I loved my kids. I don't know what made me think that having 4 kids of my own and teaching inner city Chicago, an hour and a half commute from where I was living was a good mental health mood for myself. And I burnt out pretty quickly. But the things that I learned being in the classroom and working in that environment and where assessment was so essential to the things that we were doing really helped shape my entrepreneurial journey as I came out of classroom teaching and started basically the tutoring that I was doing before I took more seriously as a business. And then why I'm starting the Assessment Alchemist at this point is because within the past year and a half, I've realized that kids K-12 and even some post-secondary college kids, the test anxiety that they feel goes on only to become worse in some instances upon taking professional licensing and assessment licensing and certification exams. Okay, so basically, almost every profession, you look at lawyers, insurance, financial, computer, cosmetology, police, fire, trades. I mean, like almost every industry has certifications and licensing exams that individuals need to take. And I specifically worked with a group of mortuary schools, they had to take their national exam upon graduation from their program to become nationally certified funeral directors and embalmers. And the fail rate for these tests is almost 50% for a lot of them. And it's because the anxiety that they might have had earlier, or even if you didn't have anxiety in high school, upon going to these certification exams, you have all the stress of this is what I've been working for, and I've spent all this time in school, and it's all based on this exam, and I have to do the exam for a couple of hours. And in some cases, you sit there for 3 hours, you take the exam, and when you hit submit, it pops up on the screen whether you pass or fail. And if you fail, you know you have to take it again in order to do what you want to do. And you have to pay a couple $100 usually to take it again, right? So it's a huge time and money investment in these exams. And it just blew my mind that no one's really talking about this. And I really don't hear a discussion around test anxiety and the changes that need to be done in order to make students feel more confident and prepared when they're walking in to take exams. And so I started this podcast, The Assessment Alchemist, so that we can have that discussion. So thank you again for joining me on episode 1. This is a weekly podcast, so it will be released every Wednesday. It's available on all of your favorite podcast platforms as well as YouTube. And every other week will be me talking about stuff. And then in between, I'll be doing interviews. So if you are interested in being a guest on the Assessment Alchemist, you can go to my website, which is mytutor, my2tor.com/podcast. And you'll get all of the information, and there'll be a form there to fill out to see if we can have a discussion around you being on the podcast. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Happy 2024, and welcome to the Assessment Alchemist.